Narration. Only copy, paste for voiceover. Picture this. Not a chart, not a textbook. A real street and a real city with real families watching their future wobble. It's a cold Dutch morning. Canals like dark glass. A nation that just learned how to turn water into wealth. Ships returning heavy with spices and silk. Workshops humming. Paintings being commissioned like people commission cars today. And in the middle of all that, a flower. Not gold, not diamond, not land. A flower. Tulipmania. The moment in history when ordinary people started making extraordinary promises over something that could die in a week. And the strangest part? For a while, it worked. And I know what you're thinking. A flower? Come on, I'd never fall for that. That's exactly why this story still matters. Because Tulipmania didn't trick people by sounding stupid. It tricked them by sounding normal, by sounding like opportunity, like timing, like finally getting ahead. If you've ever seen a friend get rich fast and felt that little sting in your stomach, you already understand the engine. Because this story isn't really about tulips. It's about what happens to a human mind when hope becomes a marketplace. So, let's go there. Back to the Dutch Republic, early 17th century. In the background, you've got a growing middle class, merchants with cash, artisans with ambition, and a culture that respects trade the way other cultures respect royalty. Now, add one more ingredient. Novelty. Tulips were not native to the Netherlands. They arrived like a rumor from the East. Exotic, elegant, different, and in a society where status could be displayed in your home, your clothing, your paintings, a rare flower was a subtle flex, a silent message. I'm doing well. But it wasn't just any tulip. The real villains here are the broken tulips, the ones with flames and streaks of color. Red lines through white, purple lightning on yellow. They looked like someone painted them by hand. People didn't know it yet, but those patterns were often caused by a virus, a sickness, a defect, which is the most poetic part of all. The most desirable tulips were, in a way, diseased. So the market is born from a contradiction. Beauty caused by damage. Value caused by weakness. And once people attach status to something like that, they don't just buy it. They defend it. They repeat the story. They recruit the next buyer. And that's how the market starts. Small at first. Collectors, gardeners, a few wealthy buyers. Then the whispers begin. This one sold for more than the last one. That one sold in a private deal. Someone in Haarlem paid a ridiculous price. Someone in Amsterdam wants the same variety. And this is where the story turns. Because tulips are seasonal. You don't buy a tulip the way you buy a chair. You buy a bulb. You plant it. You wait. Waiting is inconvenient. Markets hate waiting. So people invented a workaround. A promise. Not the bulb. The right to the bulb. The right to buy it later. The right to receive it when the season changes. Contracts. Agreements. Paper. Handshakes. Deals made in rooms that smelled like smoke and beer. Chalk marks on tables. Quick signatures. Men leaning in close. Speaking like they're sharing a secret. And sometimes, because this is how hype always works, someone in the corner listening, pretending they're not interested while their mind is already spending money they don't have. And in the winter months, when bulbs are in the ground and no one is digging them up, those paper promises become the product. You're not trading a tulip, you're trading a story. Now, let's make a human. Imagine a skilled craftsman, not poor, not rich. He builds cabinets. He has pride. He has a family. He has calluses on his hands and a ledger on his table. One night he steps into a tavern. He's not there to gamble. He's there because a friend said, "Come listen. You'll want to hear this." And there it is. A group of men around a table, talking numbers, talking varieties, talking like they're discussing ships and cargo. But the words are tulip names. Someone mentions a famous bulb, a rare one, a bulb with a reputation, a bulb that almost sounds like a person. And then he hears it. A man says, calmly, like he's stating the weather, "I bought it last week, and I can sell it today for more." Not next year. Today. The craftsman feels something in his chest. Not greed, exactly. More like relief, a new possibility. The fantasy that the hard part of life is optional. Because if this is real, then the grind has an exit door. And that's how Tulipmania spreads. Not through botany, through emotion. It's always the same pattern. First, it's the insiders. Then, it's the well-off. Then, it's the people who can't afford to be late. Because the moment you hear your neighbor made money, you don't just want money. You want to not be the only fool who didn't take the chance. And now the prices climb. But here's the key. In many cases, what people are buying and selling is not a real bulb sitting on a table. It's a contract, a future delivery, a bet that somebody else will pay more. At first, these contracts might involve deposits, small amounts, a gesture, a sign of seriousness. But as hype grows, seriousness gets replaced by speed. If you can flip the contract tomorrow, why lock up money today? If the whole town is rushing into the same doorway, who wants to pause and read the fine print? Deals happen fast. Sometimes without cash, changing hands immediately. Sometimes with alcohol on the table. Sometimes with witnesses who are more excited than reliable. And the tulips become characters in a drama. Each variety with a legend. Each name with a myth. Each sale with a new proof that this is the future. You can almost hear it. This one is different. This one is rarer. This one is the safe one. This one is the one that always sells. That sentence has destroyed more people than any sword. The villain is the belief that prices rise because they are meant to. And, yes, people start saying the insane thing out loud, that a single bulb can be worth the price of a home. Now, a responsible narrator has to pause here, because later historians argue about how widespread this truly was. How many people? How much of the economy? How dramatic? But here's what we do know. The mania was real enough to become a national cautionary tale. Real enough to show up in pamphlets and satire. Real enough to become a symbol. And symbols matter. Because symbols shape behavior. So even if only a slice of society was playing the game, that slice was loud and confident and contagious. Now let's talk about the moment everything breaks. It doesn't start with a crash. It starts with a hesitation, a routine sale, a meeting, a buyer who doesn't show, a bid that comes in lower than expected, a room that suddenly feels too quiet. And then one person says the sentence nobody wants to hear. What if this is the top? And suddenly, everyone hears their own heartbeat. Because the whole game has a silent rule. It only works if the next person is more excited than you are. That's it. That's all it takes. Because a bubble is a fragile religion. It survives only while everyone believes. Once doubt appears, the spell doesn't fade. It snaps. And in the early months of 1637, the market turns. Not with a dramatic explosion, with something scarier. Empty space. No bids. No buyers. Just People staring at each other, waiting for someone else to speak first. The buyers vanish. The bids dry up, and those paper promises become paper curses. Because here's the nightmare. If you bought a contract at a high price, you're counting on selling it higher. But if nobody wants to buy, you're holding the last chair when the music stops. And the people who were bragging last week are suddenly silent. Taverns that used to roar with deals now buzz with arguments. Your contract isn't valid. You promised. You said you had a buyer. You said it was guaranteed. It's amazing how quickly guaranteed becomes misunderstood. And then comes the ugly part. The part no one puts in the romantic versions of this story. Not just the loss, the shame. Imagine that craftsman again. He didn't want a mansion. He wanted security. He wanted the feeling that he wasn't stuck. He told his wife they were finally going to breathe. He told himself he'd been smart, not reckless. And now he looks at a piece of paper that says someone owes him a tulip bulb. A bulb nobody wants. A bulb that might not even look the way the story promised. And the money he imagined? It never really existed. It was a future. Someone whispered into his ear. Now, what happens next is not as clean as everyone paid and everyone got ruined. Some people walked away bruised, not destroyed. Some people got trapped in arguments that lasted months. Some people learned, too late, that a contract feels like money until it's time to collect. And a few people, the quiet ones, the early ones, managed to sell near the top and disappear back into normal life, letting everyone assume they were just smart. Reality is always messier. There were disputes, attempts to settle, authorities looking for ways to stop social chaos, pressure to convert contracts into smaller penalties, a kind of financial damage control. And the cultural fallout is massive. Because once a society experiences a mania, it develops a new instinct, a scar, a reflex. People start telling the Tulipmania story the way people today tell crypto stories. As a warning, as a joke, as a weapon. Don't be that guy. Don't be the tulip fool. But here's the twist I want you to sit with. Tulipmania didn't end human speculation. It trained it. The same emotional machinery shows up again and again. New world companies, railways, land booms, miracle medicines, stock bubbles, Ponzi schemes, internet bubbles, crypto bubbles, different costume, same brain. Because the real product is never the tulip. The real product is the feeling that you found the shortcut, the feeling that you're early, the feeling that you're finally about to win. And the reason Tulipmania still matters, centuries later, is simple. It proves that you don't need computers for a bubble. You don't need social media. You don't need modern banking. You just need people. You just need a story that promises escape. So if you ever wonder how smart adults can fall for something absurd, remember the canals. Remember the winter taverns. Remember the contracts traded like secrets. Remember that the most valuable tulips were beautiful because they were sick. And remember this. A bubble doesn't pop when the truth arrives. It pops when the crowd stops clapping. That was Tulipmania, a nation chasing a flower, a market built on hope, and a lesson written in shame. Because the oldest con on earth isn't a trick, it's a promise. And the most dangerous promise is the one that sounds like relief.